Well, I wanted to talk to you both. I find that the topic matter in this book is just incredibly important, and it's a really important dialogue that's going on in the U.S. And, my first question I really wanted to ask you was, what compelled you to write this book? Was it prompted by a particular experience that you had as a journalist, or something that gave you?
We found that with so many cases that reach the Supreme Court, everybody focuses on the legal issues, as they should. But the stories behind the legal issues are compelling. They're fascinating. And that is particularly true with death penalty cases. We found what happened before the crime, what happened during the crime, what happened before the court's decision, how the court decided, and often after the court's decision, what happened. They're just fascinating stories.
The more we dug in behind the decisions, this book takes you from the scene of the crime right into the Supreme Court conference room in many of those cases, and shows you the repercussions.
We're storytellers.
Absolutely.
And we have stories to tell. I think the most important thing about writing a book is having something to say. Well, here we had important decisions, landmark decisions, tough decisions. 10 of the 15 cases we focus on split the Supreme Court 5-4. And then stories surrounding the decisions that read like novels, we think.
No, I completely agree. I think that one of the quotes that I found that I especially really liked was from former Congressman Jim Coyne, and he said, "It's a little hard to believe that you have a nonfiction book you can't put down." And I thought that it was especially appropriate because I feel like this book, it's different from a lot of nonfiction works that I've read, in that it really does read like a thriller. It really does take these legal discussions, inject that humanity side to it. And
we like to think it's also, in addition to telling great stories, we like to think it's an important book in the sense that it tells you how the court works. Mm-hmm. There are so few good books out there that explain what's the process, how do they go about this, how do they decide these cases, what are they saying to one another. We see these cases that split the court 5-4. What do they really think? I mean, do their personal feelings get into it? So it's a book not just about capital punishment. It's also a book about how the court operates.
Yeah.
When you dig into the notes in the Library of Congress, the memoranda, the notes back and forth between justices that are available, and a lot of stuff is available, you at least, I'm not a lawyer. I plead not guilty or nolo contendere or whatever you guys do. But I was just fascinated by the human side of it. I mean, in many cases, justices have you can see that justices have reservations about capital punishment.
There's one case, a story about Willie Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And Martin, you did a lot of the research on that case.
It looked at first like a dry Supreme Court decision. Could a state make a second attempt at an execution that went bad? When you dig back, you discover it has all kinds of ingredients. The year is 1946. Louisiana has a traveling electric chair. They would take it from parish to parish, county to county. They would display the electric chair on the county courthouse at noon and invite school kids by the classes to come and make a field trip and look at the electric chair. Don't do bad stuff, guys, because this chair is waiting. They then would take the chair inside, hook it up to a generator on a truck, and invite the victim or mandate the victim into the chair. In this particular case, a 17-year-old black named Willie Francis, who had killed a pharmacist during a robbery, was put in the chair, strapped in, the electrodes attached to his ankle and to his head, and as one witness told us, the executioner said, "Goodbye, Willie," and Willie didn't go anywhere.
Nothing happened.
The chair malfunctioned. There was smoke and sparks, and Willie Francis had minor burns, but they took him back to his cell. That became a celebrated Supreme Court case. Was it double jeopardy to put the man in the electric chair again? The court eventually decided it was only accidental, that you could put Willie Francis in the chair again. But Justice Frankfurter, who voted for that execution because he felt constitutionally mandated to do it, was so disturbed he went behind his fellow justices' backs, quite literally, to a friend in Louisiana, very powerful in the Louisiana State Bar, and urged him to do everything he could to stop what he felt would be a travesty. The attorney, Nicholas Lamont, did attempt to stop the execution. He could not. Willie Francis died a year later, and the same hearse that had been waiting for him a year before took his body away.
And one of the things we find over and over again, the justices will split 5-4 on capital punishment, whether this person should be executed. Often, even those who vote in favor of the execution have great misgivings, not about the law, but about the wisdom of going through with the death penalty. And throughout its history in the United States Supreme Court from the 1960s on, that we've found, justices would vote to uphold a death sentence, even though they personally felt it was wrong. They felt in a democracy, this is a decision that the people must make, the state legislatures must make, and it's not for us to decide.
You know, and I thought that just to kind of take a look at the unique and really interesting kind of research that you did, and I thought that the Willie Francis case was really interesting, just in that, and that you went and you actually went into these, went to the gas chambers, and you actually went to see these chairs, to the electric chair. And I just wanted to hear about what the experience was like, you know.
No death row inmate has sat in as many electric chairs as we have.
That's a macabre fact.
Yeah, but it reminds you of what capital punishment is all about, that in this room, a life is being taken away by the state, and you start thinking about it a little more deeply. Incidentally, there are so many questions about capital punishment. A difficult one, of course, is whether to have it. But once you've decided to have it, as the United States has, how it operates, who shall be executed, what are the rules, those questions turn out to be even more difficult. And we can't say that our book will provide you the answer, but I do think we agree it helps you understand the question.
I think there are two, I call them knee-jerk theories about capital punishment. One is that it's terrible, it's an abomination, we shouldn't have it. And the other is that it is an instrument of justice that's perfectly proper. If we shake either of those knee-jerk theories, if we cause people to think, I will have decided this book is a success.
No, and I think that's an excellent point, and just I think that this has been a huge and wonderful contribution just to that discussion. And I wanted to just kind of to touch on what you just said. So the United States is one of the few industrialized democratic countries that still practices capital punishment.
Really the only one, we think. There's no other Western industrial democracy that practices the death penalty.
Yeah, and well, do you believe that this fact to be at all related to the challenges we face in reforming gun law and gun violence?
Boy, that's a tough question. I sometimes think, and I don't know the answer to that question, but I sometimes think that our culture is a little different when it comes to crime and punishment than most other Western democracies. Guns are more readily available here than in any other Western democracy, and countries like the United Kingdom, it just doesn't. They're not there, and yet we have one of the highest murder rates. So what do we do? We have capital punishment, and we find that in those states that have the death penalty, they also have the highest crime rates, primarily in the South. And in those states that do not have capital punishment, like the Northeast primarily, they have the lowest crime rates. Now, is there a cause and effect there? I don't know. Maybe what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it they have the death penalty in the South because they have such high murder rates, or is it the other way around? And you know, the answer might depend on who you ask, because opponents of capital punishment will look at it one way, and proponents look at it another way. And what we do find, though, is in this debate, when you look at the crimes and you look at the criminals who commit these crimes, as we do in this book, you find a great deal of sympathy for the death penalty. You say it's easy to support the death penalty when you look at the crimes in this book and at the criminals. But then when you look at the system, you have to have some pause. Lewis Powell, throughout his career, supported the death penalty. Later concluded it was a mistake, and it just doesn't work the way it's supposed to.
And then I thought that the point that you just made about sympathy and just relating to kind of the stories that are behind these cases, and I thought that really resonated with the Daryl Atkins case. And I know that as part of your research, you did go and actually interview with his mother, and I just wanted to know, not so much about the content, but just about what that experience was like.
That's a fascinating case. In Atkins versus Virginia, the Supreme Court held you cannot execute someone who, by state law, is mentally impaired, retarded, whatever that level is. And I mean, it's a very tough case. because most killers are not the brightest lights in the house. And someone who's a little on the dim side, should they